Just listening to that song, I don't know, I was standing over here, so I couldn't see your all's faces, but did anybody's face pop into your mind when you're listening to that, or who maybe told you a story or taught you something, or, if you didn't grow up around the church, this might not be your story, but for me, the faces of different people were popping into my mind as I was listening to them sing about who taught me to talk to Jesus. And I don't know what your story was like, but in mine, what ended up happening was those stories ended up becoming internal voices to me. I think a lot of us, when we process stuff inside, we hear the voices of people who've been before us, and if they spoke love into our lives as children, then we feel that love as adults. If they spoke pain into our lives as children, well, then that's why a lot of us struggle with these internal voices, or these things that kind of deal with us, or that speak kind of negative things into our lives today, or why we have trouble processing things to begin with. And that's one of the reasons that I was really excited to do this message series, was that it gave us space to just talk about something we don't talk about a lot in the church. Now, last week I asked you this question: what is the faith of the next generation worth, right? What is the faith of the next generation worth? And I told you the answer is everything. The faith of the next generation is worth everything. It's worth us taking 4 weeks out of our year to speak truth and wisdom into parents' lives so they understand how they might be able to shape their kids. It's worth us taking 4 weeks to speak into our own lives, even if we don't have kids yet or may not ever have kids, because there are children in our lives that we have influence over, whether we're a grandparent or a grandparent, aunt, uncle, brother, sister, distant cousin, someone who just is living in the world, or someone who's just a part of this church. There are people watching, and there are children who are trying to figure out how to live this life of faith. And to me, the faith of the next generation is worth everything. Why? Because it was worth everything to somebody when I learned the story myself. It was worth everything to somebody when I learned the story too. I mean, I saw flashes because I was one of those kids that was every Sunday morning, every Wednesday night, and we had Sunday night church too. So 3 nights a week, I was in the church. I was always there, and saw a lot of different church faces, a lot of different Sunday school teachers, and I make the joke that I was the kid that I got upset if I didn't have all the gold stars on the wall. I don't know if you remember what I'm talking about, but they would track your attendance, and they would put a little gold star in this little poster, and it was like such a big deal. I remember those faces of those people that saw something in me that maybe I didn't even see. I mean, one of the things that my mom and dad did so well for me and my brother when we were growing up is they spoke truth and love into our lives with no expectation of return. And the blessing of that was I grew up knowing I was loved, but I didn't have to earn that. Now, I twisted that a little bit when it came to God, and I'll tell that story some other time. But for my mom and dad, I knew that they loved me because of the words that they spoke. Now, last week we talked about this word time. Right? And I gave that kind of sad knife twist to some of you moms, and I didn't mean to make you cry. I'm really, really sorry. But our time is ticking away whether we're paying attention or not. And our kids are going to turn 18 one day, and they're going to move into their next job, or they're going to go to college, or they're going to move out. I mean, that's typically the plan, right? Something around the time of 18, most of the time they move out and do something else. And so the question we kind of stuck with was, what are you going to do with your time? What are you doing with your time? What should you be doing with your time? And we wrestled it down to this kind of core truth, which was when you see how much time you have left, you tend to do more with the time you have now. So the whole point of us telling you, we had the little exercise where everybody put their children's names and kind of birthdays in, and we put how many weeks you had left. That was not to make you sad. That was not to make you cry. That was not to make you depressed or have to go to counseling or anything like that. That's not really the point. It's really just for you to go, okay, there is a finite amount of time that I have. What will I do with that? What is the faith of my children worth? What is the faith of my generation that I can shape worth? And what I also said was the spiritual truth is applicable whether you're a parent or not, because all of us have time. And whether you never plan on having children or contemplating never even being in a relationship, you have time, and your time is finite as well. And so what are you going to do with that time? How are you going to spend the time that you have? And what we said was there are often a lot better ways for us to use our time than we choose to do. So from this week forward, we're going to take this idea of time, and we're going to take 3 other phrases and put it over time. And our word for today, is words. Words are way more meaningful than we often give them credit for. In fact, our words have weight that we often don't kind of track or pay attention to. But think about this for a minute. Some people have said things to you, even if it was the most insignificant statement that they thought they'd ever made, but it stuck with you, right? I will never forget this. I was in 4th grade, and my 4th grade teacher, Miss Woodward, who you don't even know, spoke, and she goes, Drew, you're really good at math. You should think about becoming an engineer one day. Lo and behold, I went to engineering school because Miss Woodward told me that I was really good at math and it was something that would fit. Now, she just made that an offhanded statement, but it stuck with me. And think about the things that people have said to you, the simplest of words that had such meaning, and that could be positive or negative. The people who've spoken truth into your lives that was meaningful, and you've kind of built your center around that, but also at the same time, people who've said phrases to you or words to you that made you feel insignificant, and they've stuck with you too. See, I think our words have way more weight than we give them credit for. And in fact, we shouldn't be surprised about this considering what we know about words to begin with. Think about this for a second. As far as we know, the very first words that were ever spoken, at least in recorded history, were when God said, "Let there be light." And God, the creator of everything, could have created creation any way that he wanted, but he chose to speak it into existence. I think God holds words at a very high value. I mean, the very fact that Jesus in the New Testament is referred to as the Word, right? If you've not read your Bibles before, you might not pick up on this, but if you ever skim through the New Testament, multiple different times Jesus is referred to as the Word of God. It's if God could speak something to us and we would hear it physically, it would be Jesus. So words have significant meaning. They have significant meaning in the way we speak to one another, but also just in the way life works. Reggie Joyner, I gave you this quote last week. He said that some of the most significant things, gifts that you can give your children, are what you give over time. And so I want to talk today about words over time. I'm talking about words over time. Because sometimes we say things over and over again. And I don't know about you, but what I've noticed is the things that I end up saying over and over again, some of them are mine, and they're original to me. But some of them are things that my mom and dad said to me. And when they come out of your mouth, you kind of cringe for a second. I love you, Mom, I'm sorry. But it happens because you're like, oh, Mom said that, and now there that is, right? The things that come out of, that we speak consistently, the phrases that come out over and over again, that we speak to our children, to the people that are around us. It doesn't even have to be our kids. That there are certain things that we're known for, right? Certain phrases that come out of our mouth. And sometimes they were given to us as kids. Sometimes they're just something that stuck because of our personality. See, words over time become a collection of messages that impact someone's direction. And you know this to be true. If you grew up and someone consistently kept telling you you weren't worth anything, you grew up feeling like you weren't worth anything, right? But if you grew up and someone was telling you that you had value and that you were loved, you grew up knowing you were valued and loved, and that impacted the direction in which your life went. Words are really, really powerful. And so the question that I kind of wrestled with when I was thinking about this message is, what are words that we should be saying? What are some of the words that we should be consistently saying over time? Or what do we all need to hear? Because especially in this world that we live in right now, whether you're a kid or a parent or not, a lot of us need to hear some things that would bring us comfort and peace as we deal with all the stuff that we're dealing with, right? And so the challenge is knowing what words and how often to say them. One of the things that I stole from my parents, specifically from my mother, that I use on my kids every day, if you asked my children what I say to them when they get out of the truck every day when we go to school, if I'm going to Rock Quarry and dropping the girls off or taking Caden to middle school or wherever it might be, I say the same thing to them every day. And it is, I love you, remember who you are. And I don't mean like, remember you're my son, don't embarrass me, or you're my daughter, don't embarrass me. That's not what that means. It's something that my mom taught me as a kid, which is remember that you are a child of God, that you have value whether you excel or fail in school or not, and you are who you are because that's how God created you to be. Remember who you are. Not who I am or who anybody else is, remember who you are. And it's a silly, stupid phrase, but it's something that I say every single week over time to my kids. Give it a couple weeks, your kids will forget. You can steal that one and use it yourself, and you don't have to give me credit. You can just say it came. But maybe it's something that you want to add into your vernacular too. But all of us have those things. We all have those things. And here's the other thing. All of our children have needs for some of those things. So what are our words over time? I want to share a proverb with you this morning as we kind of like dig into this idea. And I'm going to share it to you in 3 different translations. And I don't normally do this. If you're new to our church, usually what I do is kind of stick in the NIV. But there's a proverb verse. It's actually Proverbs 22, verse 6 that I want to share with you. And the reason I want to do this in 3 different verses is because each one of them kind of like hit a different perspective on the Hebrew language and bring it into English in a way that I think is valuable. So I'm going to tell you what each version is, and then I'll read it. One more thing about this before I begin. When we speak these words into our kids' lives, we're actually impacting the direction in which they will go. And this proverb kind of hints at that. So pay attention to that as you hear these words. So here we go. Proverbs 22:6 in the NIV. start children off on the way they should go, and even when they are old, they will not turn from it. Now, what I like about this translation is it obviously points to the idea that there's a beginning, but also that they are moving. And I don't know about you, but it seems like to me, I said this last week, whenever I feel like I get my children figured out and I know where they're at and I kind of feel comfortable in the phase that they're in, they change because they're moving. And first of all, life is unpredictable and parenting is, in a lot of ways unpredictable and lots of crazy things happen, but they're moving, right? And so if we start our kids in the right direction as best we can, and it's never too late to start, but if we point them in the next direction of where they need to take their next step, this proverb tells us that even when they're old, they won't stray from it. Now, the Message version says something just a little bit different. It's the same translation of the same language, but it brings it a different facet. So listen to this. Point your kids in the right direction. When they're old, they won't be lost. Now, I know in the church we've kind of vernacularized this word lost as being like either a Jesus follower or not, and I think there's a lot of truth to that, but I don't think this is necessarily everything that this is actually saying. I think simply what this is saying is your kids need direction, or they will be lost. They won't know where they are. They won't know where they should go. And the cool thing is, if you're doing what I talked about last week, which is building intentional influence, long-term influence in your relationship with your kids, when they do feel this way, you know who they're going to call? You. Or their student director, or their pastor, or some other influential person who you have deliberately placed in their path as a person who you trust to influence their future. And what we try to do here at TCAT is intentionally place the best people we can possibly find in the path of your children, hoping that some of them will stick as influencers so that when they feel this kind of uncomfortable, I don't know what next step to take feeling, they have people to call. And again, I said this last week, like as a dad and my wife as a mother, we want to be the people that our children trust to call when they have questions about things, even if it makes them uncomfortable, even if it makes them feel like we're going to be disappointed. Like, no matter what it is, we want that kind of influence, and I think you do too. And this whole idea is that there's a direction that our kids are going, and we can point them that way. We can do our best to kind of like, push them in the direction that they need to go. Now, every kid is different, and every situation is different, and I'm not saying that you're going to lay out every milestone and every outcome for your child. You just can't do that. But if you want them to be Jesus followers and you want them to be people of faith, there are things that you can do to point them in that direction. Now, one more translation. This is the NLT, the New Living Translation. It says this. This is probably my favorite. Direct your children onto the right path, and when they are older, they won't leave it. What's interesting is, and the reason I like this one is because this really fits my story. For those of you that know, I left the church when I turned 18 for 3 years. And it had nothing to do with, I had plenty of exposure to the gospel. I was 3 days a week, 3 services a week I was in church. But the problem for me was kind of multifaceted. The only people that I'd ever really seen live out their faith were in my home. And when I had questions about what that was supposed to look like compared to the experience I was having in my life, nobody wanted to answer them. And so I kind of understood what the path was, but I didn't really feel like I'd ever been like shoved onto it or that I was clearly walking forward. And so what I like about this is direct your children onto the right path, and when they are older, they won't leave it. What was beautiful about this was my mom had told me all about the path, and I'd walked it for a long time. And I walked away from it, but the voices in my mind and in my soul as I prayed and thought about this that actually drew me back were the people who'd prayed over me as a kid and my Sunday school teachers and the people that I'd met in church. And they actually were the ones that as I sorted through all this stuff that I had in my mind about faith, I remembered the influence that I experienced as a kid. Now, I also like this one because this proves a spiritual point that's true for all of us, whether we have kids or not. And I gave it to you last year. I did a sermon series called The Beginner's Guide to Predicting Your Future. And in it, I told you about the principle of the path. And I want to share this with you again for just a minute, and I'll sum it back up so that if you didn't hear that message, good news, I'm going to share it with you. Here's the nuts and bolts of what this is. First of all, a principle is something that is influencing your life, whether you're paying attention to it or not. It's something like gravity. It's happening, and you can't control it. So here it is. Direction, not intention, determines destination. I would like us all to read this out loud, please. So say this with me. Direction, not intention, determines destination. One more time with the people in the back nice and loud. Direction determines destination. Right. Direction, not intention, determines destination. Let me explain what this means. Let's say that you and your family have decided to go on a family vacation and you're going to go to Orlando, Florida. You're going to go see the mouse, okay? And you're going to spend a whole week in Orlando and you're super excited about it. And you get in your house and you pack up all your swimming trunks and you've got your mouse ears and you put your sunscreen and you got all the extra cameras and all the other stuff. And you prepare yourself, you pack the car, you get all the family dressed with the right clothes, you purchase everything in advance, you get everybody's tickets, you get in the car, you sit down, you actually pray and you say, Lord, give us safe traveling mercies as we travel from Tuscaloosa, Alabama to Orlando, Florida. And then you say amen and you put the car in drive and you drive to Birmingham and then you get on 65 and go north. And you go north and north and north. And then you end up in Nashville. And then you end up in Louisville, Kentucky, and you're so upset. Why am I in Louisville? I wanted to go to Orlando. I don't understand. My intention was to end up in Orlando, and here I am in Louisville. And then you get frustrated and say, God, we prayed for you to give us safe traveling mercies all the way to Orlando. Why are we in Louisville? And then some kind, considerate Kentucky person goes, you're in Louisville because you went the wrong way. Direction, not intention, determines destination. Right? I mean, we know this. If it was in your car, you get this. But this is the way our lives work too, folks. Direction, not intention, determines destination. If you say to yourself, I want to be a person who, I'm thinking about my college students for a minute. I want to marry a good Christian person. You say that, I'm looking for the right relationship. And then you decide, that's your goal. But then you decide that they have a pulse and they're semi-good looking, you will date them, right? Direction, not intention, determines destination. Now look, it's been a long time since I had to date, okay? So I'm not saying I have a ton of advice for you there. But if you have a goal, right? If I asked all of you all, 10 years from now, where do you want your life to be? I think all of us would have kind of a 3-sentence statement about that. But if we're making every decision possible not to get us there, even though that's our intention, guess what? You're not going to get there. You're not going to get there. And so what I know about my own life, in my own walk, is I say, I want to have a deeper relationship with Jesus. I want to really focus in on that. But then I don't know anything about it. If I don't spend time reading, I don't spend time praying, I don't spend time going to small group, that's been a part of my life in the past. And then I go, why am I experiencing all this struggle in my faith? Well, I had a really great intention. I just didn't do anything to get me there. And I had a great destination in mind. I just didn't make the choices that I should have made, even though I knew better, to get me there. Direction, not intention, determines destination. The other thing, the reason this is so important is because things happen in life. There will be things that come along in your path that capture your attention. Okay, you need to know this. There will be things that come along that capture your attention. Perfect example. When I was 18 years old, I was in the best shape of my life. I just got accepted in the engineering program at UK. I had a full scholarship. I had a really sweet car. I had a Mustang GT. I was I had the chrome rims on the outside of it. I was the coolest kid in school. I had and in my day this was cool, but I had the lights inside and underneath. It was red and the car was black and shiny, and I literally waxed it every week. I had frosted tips, believe it or not, and my hair was exactly what it needed. This was the 2000s, okay? So don't make fun of me. But I was in my prime, and so I get into college, and I'm thinking, I'm going to do really great. I'm going to stay in school. I'm going to date a bunch of people, but I'm not going to get serious because I don't really want a relationship right now. And then I met Shanna Bradshaw, and all of my attention was captured. And the next thing that I knew, I was doing stupid things like deciding to sell my car because it would be better for us to be in a relationship where we had an SUV. And the next thing that I knew, I was staying up really late at night and writing stupid notes and getting on instant messenger because we didn't have texting a lot then. And I was staying up late on the phone because they were still attached to the wall and all this crazy stuff. My attention was captured. And then the next thing I know, we've gotten married and we have 3 human beings that wouldn't even be in this world because if they hadn't been in this world, we hadn't met. And look, I am absolutely in love with my wife. I love her so much. And that is a really great thing that captured my attention because thank God it did, because I could still be standing here with frosted tips and none of y'all would like that. But that's a really great thing that captured my attention. But the struggle is there are actually things that will come along that will capture your attention in the wrong way. And if you don't have a good destination in mind, then everything that comes by will sway your attention. And isn't it true that as soon as I met Shanna Bradshaw, the direction of my life went whoop. How many of you all, just quick show of hands, have met someone, and it may not even be like a romantic significant other, but you've met someone who has influenced your life, and when you met them, the direction of your life changed? Just a quick show of hands. Now, thank you. So I love all the hands. Now, one more. How many of you all have met someone, and after spending a lot of time with them and realizing the directions you have changed, you have said to yourself, man, I wish I'd never met that jerk. Look at all the hands, right? I mean, seriously, things will come along that will capture your attention, and these things will steer you in a direction. They will steer you in a direction. So what I say is, your direction, not your intentions, determine your destination. And this is really important when it comes to the way we as Christians live our lives, but it's also particularly important when we think about the way we parent. Because we could say, like, you know what, I want long-term influence in my kids' lives. So when they grow up and they're starting to face all the questions that they have at school about drugs and sex and technology and all this stuff and faith, I want them to come to me and ask me that. But then we're never open and never have any conversations with our kids about that, never prove ourselves trustworthy, never choose to try to speak any of that truth in their lives or make ourselves available or make ourselves unjudgy when they come to us with things that make us uncomfortable. Then we're not going to really get there. Let me tell you something and then why this is so relevant. And some of this is kind of like, I don't mean to make that way, but I want to prove my point. Did you know that 38% of middle school boys report using protein supplements? And that means the protein powder. Do you know why? Because, maybe this isn't your kid, but like this speaks to the influence that body image has on our middle schoolers. I got to get in shape, and I got to have right muscle. And, I don't know what you looked like in 6th grade, but I could have used a lot of this, and it wasn't going to help, okay? And a lot of our middle school boys feel this pressure and this weight of body image. And middle school girls, same thing. I mean, this is just speaking to the weight of body image on our 10 through 13-year-old children. That they feel like they got to look a certain way or act a certain way or say a certain thing. What about this one? Did you know that 17% of high schoolers drink, smoke, or use drugs during the school day? During the school day. Now, maybe again, you might say that's not my kid, but doesn't it kind of speak to the stress and the anxiety that all of our high schoolers are feeling right now and the negative outlets that are actually out there for them to try to deal with that stress? I said it in a couple of messages ago I think it was during my Scared to Death series, that the average high schooler today is under stress and anxiety to the level of what a psychiatric patient in the 1920s would have been under. In other words, if they measured the stress and anxiety of a high schooler today and put that against a psychiatric patient in the 1920s, the numbers today would be higher than the psychiatric patient in the 20s. That's what our high schoolers are facing. I don't have a high schooler yet, but he's not that far away. And again, you may say, like, this is not my kid and this is not what they do. Awesome, but do you know why this is actually happening? This is actually happening because of the stress and anxiety and the weight of the world that our high school students feel like they are carrying. One more. This was my least favorite because I've got a bunch in this age. 43% of elementary school-aged children have used social media to message a total stranger. 43%. As soon as I gave the preview of this message and went home and talked to all my girls, all of them at the same time. 43%. Again, and you may say, this is not my kid, we're really careful about this, but like, what does this say about the world in which our children are growing up? What does this say about the world and kind of we're in right now? And look, every generation has its own thing, okay? There were plenty of this kind of stuff, and the statistics and the things would have been different, but the stress is still the same, and the issues are still the same. Kids are still facing stuff, and they need healthy influence in these areas. That's all I'm saying. And again, you could be saying, like, this is not my kid, I'm really careful with this. Awesome, fantastic. But this is the world in which our children and the current generation of children will grow up, and one day we will hand them to the keys of the church and the gospel and say, you know what, God has trusted all of the weight of what's going to happen in the future to trust with you. And we're going to take the mantle off, like metaphorically from the Old Testament, we're going to lay it on their shoulders. Won't we want long-term influence? Won't we want to be people who are trusted? And won't we want our children to feel like they can trust us when we put them in that dorm room and we cry those tears and we walk out of the door on their first day of college? And I know, like, you could say, well, my child is 6 years old. That's a long time from now. Or we just got pregnant. Or we don't even have kids yet. We haven't even thought about it. Awesome. Here's the big thing to think about. Anticipating is looking ahead at what will probably happen and getting ready for it. Anticipating is simply looking ahead at what probably will happen and getting ready for it. And if I zero in, again, just for a minute, for us as parents, your kid's going to grow up. Unless you have a time machine, your kid's going to grow up. My kids are going to grow up. And I don't like thinking about it any more than you do, but I can't control it, so what do I do about it? Well, I anticipate what's going to come next. And I told you guys last week, in our household, my wife is the one that's super brilliant about the physical growth stages that they're in. And I just said to myself, I was going to download everything that I knew about building relationships so I could have healthy conversations with my kids about their faith as they grew up. And that was our partnership. She was going to tell me when it was time to purchase things like bras. So, again, I'm super uncomfortable and crying, but it's the reality in which we live in. And I'm going to tell her when it's time to have conversations about things like sex. And it's time to have conversations about things like technology. And it's time to have conversations about things like faith and salvation. And we just tag teamed that. And that was our decision. That was our partnership. And I don't know what it might look like in your household, but we just knew this was a thing, and we decided to get ready for it. And you don't have to, look, you could say, well, my kid's 13. What do? I haven't started. Awesome. Start now. It's never too late. It is never too late to start. Now, what are we offering you, right? This is not like a sell. I'm not meaning it like that, but I just want you to know why, first of all, how important this is to us as your church staff. But then what are we doing about it? Well, we decided when we got here, and it's something that we've been working intentionally for the past year, is that there are really 4 areas of influence in which we could make a difference intentionally in your all's lives as parents and in the lives of your kids. And so here's what those 4 areas are. We want to be able to help kids develop healthy habits, sexual integrity, technological responsibility, and faith. Now, I want to break each of those down just really briefly and share what that means. Healthy habits. 1. When we think about kids who are facing such body image things, we feel like the Bible speaks a ton to what God feels about the way we look and how we are. And so we want to help kids learn to strengthen their body through exercise, nutrition, and self-advocacy. Now, will we say this out loud to a preschool student? No, but this is in the back of our mind when we're teaching. Will we say this out loud to a middle school and high school student? Yeah, we actually do. But from cradle to college, as we say, this is something that we have in mind. Wouldn't you like your kid to make healthy choices with the nutrition and the way in which they view their body, especially when there's so much influence out there about how people think they should use and view their body. Number 2, sexual integrity. Wouldn't you love for your kids to think about this word when it came to this word, right? To put these 2 together. And here's what we mean when we say that. We want kids to understand that they should guard their potential for intimacy through appropriate boundaries and mutual respect. That's it. Now, we get your children 52 hours a year. You get a little over 5,000 a year. And so you have 10 times more influence in this area than we do, but if we can help understand this big idea and then give you the resources you need to have these kinds of conversations, this is the direction we're trying to go together. We're setting that direction so we can start our children on the right kind of path so that when they're older, they won't leave it. Because I don't know about you, but in my life, these 4 areas of influence, some of the biggest regrets that I have in my life come in the areas of these 4 areas of influence. And we can't, you can't control your children every decision they make. Okay, that would be awesome if you just punched it into a computer. Maybe it wouldn't be awesome. I don't really know. But you can't. I mean, it doesn't matter. You can't. So to the best of your ability, wouldn't you like to influence the decisions they make in these areas? Number 3, technological responsibility. I've noticed this. For those of you that have young kids, I would love to have a conversation with you. Does it seem like, the next thing you know, your 2-year-old is asking you for a phone? I'm serious. It feels like every birthday now is like, can I have a phone? No, you're 5. Who are you going to call? You don't even know anybody, right? No. But it's a reality in which we live, that this stuff is kind of here. So again, in our house, it feels like they're on technology a lot, especially during the pandemic when our kids were doing virtual school. And I know that was hard on teachers and schools, and so I'm not negating that at all, okay? So don't hear that coming from my lips. But did you notice, parents, that your kids spend an exorbitant amount of screen time, right? And I don't know if you noticed this, but for me, my kids changed. It changed kind of the way they looked at life and the way things were going on, and it was a weird time. So we talk about technological responsibility. It's something we just want. It's not going to go away, so we just want to help kids own it. And so here's what we say. We want to leverage the potential of online experiences to enhance offline community and success. That's our center piece. Okay? All four of these things have really one thing in mind, and that's that we think we should set a destination out there. We should make a plan and help shepherd our children and the next generation in that direction. And look, we can't control everybody's outcomes, and we wouldn't want to, okay? God made all of us individually, and there's no kid that's ever been created like your kid. Your kid is unique. But we feel like some of those experiences are fairly consistent, and if we could shepherd them in the right direction, this is what we would do. And so we say, without a clear destination, you tend to only focus on the right now. How many of y'all, and look, I've done this too. So you're in the car, they're all in the back seat, they're screaming like crazy, and you just throw chicken nuggets at them until they stop. Yes, okay, thank you. Yeah, right? It says like, here, just have Skittles, have chicken nuggets, shh, right? I can't take it anymore. That's the thing, and look, my mom did that too. I ate a lot of Happy Meals when I was a kid, trust me. But like when you don't have a destination in mind, you tend to only focus on the right now, and you tend to only focus on what makes your kids happy. That's a reality too. Like if you don't really have this destination out there, I'm not saying don't make your kids happy, okay? Don't tell them, Pastor Drew said you had to be miserable. That's not what I said. What I'm saying is if you don't have a destination in mind, you're just going to make decisions that make them happy because that's all you really have in mind. And sometimes, now this is going to hurt, especially the kids in the room, sometimes we have to make decisions that won't make our kids happy. And the older they get, the more complicated those decisions are. It goes from no, you can't have a Happy Meal to no, you can't go to that party. No, you can't date that boy. No, you can't go and see that girl. Right? Those are complicated conversations. If you don't have a destination in mind, you might go, yeah, sure, it's fine. Without a clear destination, you tend to fear what you can't control. Here's what I mean by this. All of us experience this. Whether you are a parent or not, you experience this. You make it through your day, you lay down in bed, you pull the covers up, your head's on your pillow, you breathe that sigh of like, and then that internal voice goes, am I messing this up? Am I doing this right? And as parents, we go, am I messing them up, right? One of my friends in college told me, I said, what's your destination for parenting? He said, I just don't want to be the reason they need therapy. Like, I think you could set the bar a little higher. Set the bar a little higher. But all of us have this to the degree, like, am I doing this right? Like, what don't I know? What aren't I controlling? And so if you don't have a destination in mind, you're just going to kind of fear all of that. One more thing. This is kind of our statement for kids ministry and for student ministry. This is kind of summing all of this together. If we were to say we had a plan for your children, right, and we were trying to like maybe never say this out loud to them, but like I'll show you how this works in just a minute. We say this. We want every kid to know they are made in the image of God. And we want them to love God with all their heart, soul, and strength, and to trust Jesus to have a better future. So our plan as small group leaders, as large group leaders, as influencers within student ministry, kids ministry, is to help the children that walk through the door that end up on that side to move in this direction. And more than that and better than that, our role is to help you as parents get your kids here. So we'll use all of the power and the influence that we have to help you win as a mom and you win as a dad to get your kids here. That's what we try to do. And here's what it looks like. You're not going to be able to see this picture on the screen. That's not the point. I have copies of it for you in the back. I just want you to see this is the way we look at it. And on this side, 0. And on this side, college. Okay? It's pretty simple. And there's a plan all the way through. And this is what we try to work on. This is what we train to. This is how we help our volunteers understand where they're going. And in the back of the room, we kind of got a fun game today. And then we've got copies of this in all 4 of those areas of influence for you. Take as many as you want. If we run out, we'll send you some PDFs. We can post them, send them in the church email, whatever you want. But here's why we're doing this, okay? Again, every child is unique. Every child is unique. And life is oftentimes unpredictable. Life is oftentimes unpredictable. But when you have a plan and you have a direction in mind, you always have a North Star. You always have a North Star. If you keep the end in mind and you know where you are now, you can always do something that will lead a kid in a better direction. Always, no matter when you start, whether they're 18 months old or 18 years old, it's never too late to start. And what we want to do is help you win. So at the back of our room today, if you're new, this is the first part of this series you've come to. We've got a kind of a phase gallery set up. It's information and fun stuff about every phase a kid goes through in life. But in the center of the room back there today, we have a chalkboard. And what we would love for you to do is to grace us, bless us with some of the silly things that your kids say or that you say over time, okay? So for example, I put one up there this morning. Keegan, my daughter, had a tendency when she was a baby, and it just stuck, to when we'd say, hey, can you go do this? She'd go, I don't know how can't. I don't know how can't. And so I don't know how can't has become vernacular in our house. And whenever my wife asks me to mow the grass or do the dishes, I say, I don't know how can't. And it just stuck, okay? So maybe y'all got some of those. We would love for you to bless us with some of the things that get said in your house over time. And while you're back there, write them on the chalkboard. There's plenty of chalk, but also grab some copies of that phase chart so you kind of know where your kids are and where they're going. We love you. We want you to win. We love your kids. We want them to win too. We know it's a complicated world. Life is complicated. It's more complicated than it's ever been. You want to get it right, and we want to help. So let me pray for you. Father God, I want to just thank you so much for the people in this room, for the people who feel the weight of the next generation, for the people who are still trying to figure out what their part might be in that current generation and the next generation, and for all of us who just realize the reality of living as a Jesus follower in this world and what that might look like for us and the people that are younger than us. God, there's a lot of weight in that. But I know, Lord, that you love us, and I know that you are for us, and then you know that you proved that by giving us Jesus, that he died on the cross and was raised from the dead so that we would know not only your unconditional love, but that life is far grander and far longer than even the short amount of time we get here on this earth. So God, keep us in that perspective today. Bring peace to the parents in this room who are feeling the weight of this moment. Help them to realize they're not alone, that they don't have to do this on their own, that you've got their back, and so do we. But also, God, for the people in this room that maybe not know you, give them an opportunity to take a step towards you today. Lord, we love you. We ask all this in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. Amen.